everyone, Kirsten here. So today I thought I would be doing another tag video. I haven't done tag videos in quite a long time, so I figured today is the day that I would actually, sit down and do like this little tag video. Well, since October recently hit, I figured now would be the perfect time for me to go ahead and do the horror movie tag. I am a huge fan of horror films myself, and with the fact that October recently hit, I figured now would be the good time to start working on this type of tag video. So, without further ado, I am going to go ahead and dive right on into the questions. Question number 1. What is your favorite horror films? Well, it's hard for me to pick one in specific, but if I had to name off a few right at the top of my head, definitely movies like The Descent, Rob Zombie's Halloween, Wolf Creek. I would say those type of films in particular would be considered my absolute favorite. I know I have quite a few more, but those movies in particular are at the top of my head that I can actually think of that would be considered to be one of my absolute favorite horror films of all time. So if you would love a good little gore fest or something that really makes your skin crawl, definitely those movies would be my pick. Oh, and you cannot forget about Last House on the Left, I think the movie is called. Yeah, just right off the bat, those are the few horror films at the top of my head that I would consider them to be my absolute favorite. Okay, so question number 2. Who is your favorite Who is your favorite Scream queen? It just sounds weird saying that. I don't know why. I don't have a specific favorite, to be exact, simply because the horror films that I watch, they all tend to be like different sets of characters each and every single time. But if I had to pick one specific girl at the top of my head that I would consider somebody to be my favorite Scream queen, there, I said it right this time. If I had to pick one at the top of my head that would consider to be my absolute favorite, it would definitely have to be, I think her name is Catherine Isabel, and she played in quite a few horror films, I think. I think she played in Freddy vs. Jason, and the more recent one she played in, I think, was called, what was it? American Mary. That's another really good horror film that I like. That one movie in particular, American Mary, it is definitely up my alley with like body modification, strippers, sexy women in lingerie. That is definitely my thing when it comes to like horror films and stuff, is to have like that bit of edginess, you know what I mean? So yeah, if I had to choose one Scream queen in particular, Catherine Isabel is definitely it. Question number 3. What type of horror film do you like? The type of horror film that I most definitely like would have to be something that's a little bit more on the lines of anything that is based on true stories, anything that is considered to be torture porn. Those two genres in particular are definitely up my alley with horror films. Anything based on a true story, anything that's psychological haunting, any sort of torture porn, that is definitely my thing when it comes to horror films. Okay, so question number 4. What type of horror film do you least like? I wouldn't say there is something at the top of my head that I would least consider to be, not liking. If I had to pick one genre in particular that I don't specifically care for, it would have to be like, I don't know, I think just 80s horror films. and just any old horror film in particular. If you literally sit down and watch old horror films for hours, like, you'll start to realize really fastly, you'll start to realize really fast that horror films back in the day are just the gore and the violence that is being portrayed in the movies. They're just so cheesy and just so bad, honestly. Just so bad. Just so bad and cheesy and corny. It's just not my thing. I'm sorry if you guys like traditional 80s horror films, but that's true. I just don't specifically care for that stuff. Like, I would prefer Rob Zombie's Halloween versus like the original Halloween. I'm sorry, but I just don't specifically care for older horror films. I'm sorry. Okay, so question number 5. If you were a scream queen in any movie, which one would it be? Okay, so I have given some pretty good thoughts about this one, actually. Obviously, it's hard to pick just one in particular, but there's like a few scenarios that I would consider having a role in. Like, if I were to be rolled in like a horror film right now, I don't mind what position I'll be taking, to be honest. Like, I could be, how do I put this? Like, I could be the main heroine of like the horror film, or I could be like the victim in the film. I could be like the innocent nutty freak. I could just be the nutty woman in like a horror film. And then another possible scenario is I could be like the psycho bitch in that movie, where I could just literally take my chainsaw and just randomly kill a bunch of people. It's hard to pick just one in particular, but honestly, I'll go for any role that I could participate in when it comes to being a scream queen. So yeah, all those scenarios at the top of my head, I would definitely play in any time of day, to be honest. Okay, so question number 6. Who is your favorite horror villain and why? My favorite horror villain. That's a really good question, actually. If I had to pick one, I would say Pinhead from the Hellraiser series. He definitely gives out like one of those creepy vibes. If I had to give out a reason why I really like Pinhead, I just simply like the idea that he's just a guy from hell and he's just here to tear you apart type of thing. I don't really have a reason for liking Pinhead. I just think he's awesome, to be honest. I just think he's so awesome. So villainous. I just like that aspect about him. Okay, so question number 7. Who is the worst horror villain and why? To be honest, if I could name one specific horror villain at the top of my head, it is it is definitely Chucky. Like, I'm sorry, I just don't find him scary. I know people get creeped out about like dolls and shit, but honestly, I just find him a bit humorous, to be honest. Like, he's not even a scary doll. He's just a creepy doll in like a horror spoof, I feel like. Because I've seen a few Chucky films and he's not scary. I'm sorry to point that out. He's just not scary. He's just more humorous than he is scary. Okay, so question number 8. What is the worst horror film you have ever seen and why? Oh goodness, I can think of one already. I'm probably gonna get shit for this because some people like this film. Actually, there's kind of mixed reviews about this film. Some people like it and some people don't like it. For me, I'm the type of person that doesn't really like this type of horror film. Like, the type of horror film I'm thinking of at the top of my head right now is The Human Centipede. I'm sorry to say this for those of you who really like that film, but honestly, it's not a scary film. It's more like a grossed out film to me than it is like a horror film. Like, literally, what's so scary about sewing or like surgically attaching somebody's mouth to their asshole to eat somebody's feces. Like, who comes up with this shit? That is just so fucking disgusting. Like, if I were to choose between becoming a part of a fucking human centipede versus, like, being completely fucked by Leatherface's chainsaw, I would rather have Leatherface fuck me up so hard with a chainsaw versus, like, being a part of a human centipede. Like, that's just disgusting. You've got people that are literally, like, puking and dying and shit. That's just not scary. I'm sorry. That is the worst horror film I have ever seen in my entire fucking life. I do not recommend watching that film because it's just disgusting. Okay, so question number 9. Which horror film do you think is overrated? I think movies that I think that are a little bit overrated is something like, I think the paranormal series. Like, I know the idea of, like, haunted houses and ghosts are, like, a really creepy thing, but there comes to a point where, like, a ghost film or, like, a haunting film can be either a little bit overrated or just so fucking scary to a point where you just can't really watch it anymore or some shit. Like, honestly, from watching a few of the paranormal activity films, I don't know. To me, I just find that to be overrated because, you know, there's no way in hell that some part of that paranormal shit can be real. I mean, let's be honest here. I don't know, I just find that to be a little bit overrated. Like, to a point where it's overdue. Does that make any sense? I don't know, I just think that kind of gives that away, to be honest. I mean, it's a good film series, don't get me wrong, but it's just kind of overrated. Okay, so question number 10. Which horror series, or horror in general, do you think is underrated? The type of horror that I would consider to be a little bit underrated would have to be something along the lines of, like, teen slasher films, and especially 80s films. Between those two, I think would be considered a little bit underrated. Let's see. Okay, so question number 11. Do you like horror spoof movies? I'm not the type of person that gets into spoof movies because I find them to be a little bit stupid, to be honest. But sometimes I'll watch them for a good laugh, but honestly, I don't really get into, like, horror spoof movies. It's just really not my thing, but some of them can be pretty funny and then others can be just very stupid. To answer that question, I really don't get into horror spoof movies. Okay, so question number 12. What is your favorite horror movie series? My favorite horror film series would have to be Saw. I really do like the Saw series. The only thing I am going to be brutally honest here about is the fact that I think straight after the 4th or like the 5th movie of the Saw series, it kind of turned me off towards like the end, because, you know, it always seemed to end with like a little cliffhanger at the end and it didn't have a proper ending. Like, I think the final chapter, the way it ended, it just kind of turned me off, to be honest. So I like Saws 1 through 4, but 5, 6, and 7 I just don't care for. Okay, so the 13th question isn't technically like a question. It just says, name 13 horror villains. Okay, so there is Freddy Krueger, there is Jason Voorhees, Leatherface, Michael Myers, Pinhead, Jigsaw or Billy, as you would prefer, Dracula, Captain Spaulding's, Ghostface, Chucky, Jeepers Creepers, Candyman, and Hannibal Lecter. So there we have it. Okay, so question number 14. What horror movie scenes have grossed you out the most? Normally I don't get grossed out too easily, but usually any type of horror scene where somebody is like literally graphically tearing off somebody's nails, like the tips or underneath somebody's nails. Like, for example, this was a very stupid movie I watched a long time ago, and I'm trying to remember what it was. The only thing I can remember is that it was part of the Masters of Horror series, I think. And I'm trying to remember what it was. It was like a Japanese horror film episode, I think. There was like this one scene where like these women were like graphically, oh my god. It's kind of making my skin crawl already. I can feel it in my fingers because it's grossing me out, to be honest. Oh my god. But there was this one part where like these women were like using their needles to like gash out the underneath of like the nails. That was the most disturbing thing I've ever watched, to be honest. Between that and like graphically stabbing out somebody's eye, between those two, they kind of gross me out. Especially if it's very detailed, very, very graphic shit. Another film I wanted to really point out that kind of grossed me out a little bit is, if you're familiar with a horror film, I think it's called The Fly. So this one scene that kind of like really got me disturbed and grossed out was when this woman had like this night terror or nightmare where like she was literally giving birth to like a giant maggot, and just the way it was like wiggling around and like squirming and shit, it just, oh god, it grossed me out so much. That's another thing that kind of influenced me to become child-free. It just, oh, so disgusting. It was gross. And I hate maggots too. They're like smelly and disgusting and shit. Okay, so question number 15. What is your favorite music scene in a horror movie? Favorite music from like a horror film? I don't have one in particular, to be exact, but if I had to choose one, it would definitely be, I would say my favorite music scene would have to be the ending to like 30 Days of Night. Basically, if you haven't seen this movie already, I'm gonna be spoiling the scene. But basically, at the end, there's this character, Eben, who basically used a sample of like vampire blood, and he injected the vampire blood into his veins so he could become a vampire, so he could risk saving a child and I think his wife or his ex-wife or something, because I guess they were surrounded by vampires underneath a car, and then the whole town was also being burned. So he made the risky decision to become a vampire. He fought the main vampire leader. He defeated him, of course, and risked saving the child's life and his wife's life, I think. After Eben completely defeated the vampire leader, the vampires fled from the scene because, number one, they defeated the leader. Number two, you know, it was basically dawn, I think. So they had to escape anyway. And so, you know, Stella, which is Eben's wife, she was pretty upset that he became a vampire, of course. So dawn was coming. He didn't want to live long enough to become a vampire. And there's this one scene where like they kissed, and then the sun was starting to rise, and then he was bursting into ashes, screaming and crying and shit. Basically what I'm trying to get at is the ending to that song is just so psychologically haunting, and it's just a very pretty haunting melody. Haunting melodies is usually my thing, so I just really like that ending to that song, to be honest. It's just very creepy and melody-like. Okay, so question number 16. What is your favorite horror movie soundtrack? I don't have a favorite, to be honest, but I really do like some of Rob Zombie's films where like he plays 60s, 70s, 80s type of music, and I really do get into those type of songs generally, so I just think it sounds really cool, to be honest. All of his musics from his films are just really cool. I'm not gonna lie, I just like all of his films generally too. Yeah, I'd say that's my favorite soundtrack, and that's like my favorite types of songs, to be exact. Okay, so question number 17. Who is your horror movie crush? If I had to pick one guy at the top of my head, it would have to be like Tate from like the very first series of American Horror Story. He just gived out like that creepy teenage boy feel. I just find him to be cute in that series, to be honest. So I would say that would be considered my horror film crush, to be honest. Okay, so final question, and this is question number 18. What horror movie character do you feel the most sympathy for? So if I had to pick one character at the top of my head that I feel like this horror villain I feel the most sympathy for, I'm gonna have to go with Michael Myers in this one, simply because, you know, he basically grew up having like a shitty childhood, which I can definitely relate to. So like, if you watched Rob Zombie's remake to the Halloween movie, it basically showed in the beginning of how Michael Myers like grew up having to deal with his childhood and the like, how he grew up in a nut house. That was definitely an awesome feature that Rob Zombie remade this horror film and bring it back to life. So honestly, that character specifically I could definitely relate to the most because, you know, just a shitty childhood on top of being a villain, I could definitely feel the most sympathy for. So that is basically it for this little horror movie tag that I had to share for today. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video altogether. So if you did, be sure to sucker punch that like button down below, comment down below as well, and if you haven't already, please do dedicate the time and effort to subscribe to my lovely channel to become a part of my army of darkness, and you will be updated with a brand new video every single Friday as well as Sundays now, so that is that. And again, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a chill week, an awesome day or night, and I will talk to you all soon in the next video. So until then, stay completely dark and so fucking brutal and awesome, my friends. So take care, bye for now.